We now turn to finishing chapter 1, looking at truth and knowledge, and then finishing with what critical thinking can and cannot do. Now, truth is a matter of extensive philosophical debate. Over the centuries, philosophers have put forth various notions of truth and have debated it extensively. These have ranged from the kind of common sense notion that a claim is true when it matches reality. And then, of course, that raises all kinds of problems about what's real, what is to match reality. And then during the 20th century, philosophers really got into the logic of it, and developed all kinds of strange and exotic theories of truth. Now, when people say a claim is true, what they often mean is that they agree with it or believe in the claim. So if someone says, it's true that aliens abducted someone, what they're basically saying is they believe it. Because being true is rather distinct from believing it. But people often say that it's true, when what they really mean is they happen to believe it. Now, of course, people will generally not believe things they know to be false for obvious reasons. Now, turning back to the question of truth, the idea basically is this. From our standpoint, or practical standpoint, we're going to go with the common sense, intuitive view of truth, that a claim is true means that it corresponds to reality. So, for example, if I say that the cat is in the hat, that obviously is true when you got a cat, and the cat is in fact in the hat. So true claims basically get reality right. Now, as might be imagined, given that I said that philosophers had debated this for centuries, this is a problem of knowledge. What is it to know things? Now, truth ties into this. Knowledge, just like truth, is a matter of incredible debate. It goes way back to the beginning of philosophy. In fact, the idea of knowledge is considered to be a branch of philosophy itself, known as epistemology. And roughly put, it's the study or theory of knowledge, dealing with questions about what is knowledge, what can we know, what can't we know, and what are the limits of knowledge. Famous epistemologists include people like, Plato wrote about it, and perhaps most famously René Descartes with his classic, evil demon, which raises the question of how does a person know that what they're experiencing is real. And this, of course, was developed in a much more interesting manner in the context of movies like the classic Matrix and somewhat more recently, Inception. Now, just like with truth, philosophers again have debated this endlessly and constantly, and have come up with all sorts of accounts of what it is to know something. Now, just like with truth, we're going to go with a rather practical and somewhat simple view of knowledge. The idea is this. From a practical standpoint, a person can claim they know that the claim P is true if the following conditions are met. First, they got to believe it. So in order to know something, kind of the first basic thing is you got to know it. Second, a person has to have an argument beyond a reasonable doubt for thinking that that claim is true. And thirdly, a person has to have no reason, no good reason, to think they might be mistaken in their belief that the claim is true. So the basic idea is they believe it, and it is justified. And of course, to be, proper knowledge, it's also got to be true. And this was known as for quite some time as the justified true belief model of knowledge. And of course, it's been severely beaten in philosophy. From a practical standpoint, we'll go with that. We now turn to the final part of chapter 1, which is the matter of what critical thinking can and cannot do. Now, people often lump together all thinking, taking good thinking, hard thinking, clear thinking, problem solving, and of course the dreaded thinking outside the box. Now, critical thinking is not the same thing as, hard thinking or thinking outside the box or problem solving. Critical thinking is the kind of thing we do after we do those other types of thinking. Thinking hard about stuff, thinking clearly about stuff, solving problems, thinking outside that box or in the box or beside the box or next door to the box or 20 miles from the box. What critical thinking is basically thinking about thinking. Now, by itself, critical thinking won't tell you what to do. It doesn't, miraculously give you the answer of what you should do. But it can help a person spot bad reasons. And critical thinking can do this, but might not always do this for obvious reasons, because reasoning might yield or fall before self-interest, wishful thinking, a desire for acceptance, the various cognitive biases we looked at, and the various fallacies and persuasive devices we'll look at later. So critical thinking is good at sorting out stuff, provided one uses it properly. But of course, by itself, it's not enough to make good decisions. One must not only have the critical tools to assess claims, one must also have the will to act upon those decisions, and of course the values by which to assess whether one should do such things or not. Because in many ways, critical thinking is somewhat morally neutral. It can tell you, you know, give you the ability to assess things, but by itself, it won't tell you whether something is good or bad, which of course brings us to ethical reasoning, which is a subject for later on and also in another class, namely ethics. That brings us to the end of Chapter 1, covering such matters as claims, facts, opinions, arguments, cognitive biases, and other such stuff.